The day I found out I was a fake heiress, I dare not act like a madman again. She stopped trying to check up on him and stopped hysterically questioning him, completely transforming into the obedient wife that Ethan Hale loved most, just because of my dad's warning. Other wealthy heiresses still have their families after a divorce, but what do you, a fake heiress, have after a divorce? I became completely honest. Even when an open box of birth control pills was found in his pocket, she pretended not to know anything. After all, once the money is gone, who has the mind to be in love? But when faced with my feigned ignorance, Ethan Hale's expression suddenly darkened as he took Ethan Hale's coat. A box of medicine fell out. I glanced at it once and quickly looked away, because it was a box of birth control pills. I pretended not to see clearly and tried to speak in a natural tone. Please pick up your things, I'll go wash my clothes first. Just as I was about to leave, my wrist was grabbed. I turned around. Ethan Hale is very tall, his brows were prominent, his nose was high and straight, and his eyelashes were long. When viewed from the side from this angle, he exuded a strong sense of pressure. I felt a little nervous instinctively. This box of medicine is for Leela. She's been under a lot of stress lately due to many projects, which has caused menstrual irregularities. The doctor prescribed it when she went to the hospital, but last night when we went to discuss the project together, she asked me to help her carry it because her skirt didn't have pockets. He sighed, his usually sharp eyes filled with weariness. I was just too busy with work and forgot to return it to her, but I really have absolutely no relationship with her. This was the first time he had explained so much to me. It might be because we had just gone through a divorce recently. Seeing that I remained silent, he suddenly took out his phone. If you don't believe me, I can go to her and get the test results. I smiled faintly. No need. It's just a small matter. Not worth bothering them. Ethan Hale was taken aback, staring intently at my face, his tone inquisitive. And what did you just do? I knew what he wanted to ask, so I offered to explain. I'm just wondering whether I should send it to her now, since it wouldn't be good to delay her treatment. But it's too late today. You can deliver it to her tomorrow. I'll go wash the clothes first. After explaining, I left in a hurry. That was close. We almost got caught, after all. I still remember what my dad said. In a wealthy family, feelings are not important. Interests come first. Instead of dwelling on whether he loves you or not, you should think more about how you, a fake heiress, will cope without him if things really come to the point of divorce. But I didn't notice that when I turned around, Ethan Hale's face instantly turned ugly. In the middle of my sleep, half asleep, Ethan Hale pulled back the covers and pulled me down to lie down. He held me tightly around the waist, his hot breath hitting the back of my neck. Our 5th wedding anniversary is just around the corner. When the time comes, I'll take you to Antarctica to see the aurora borealis, which you've always wanted to see. My body stiffened. Ethan Hale made the same promise to me on our last anniversary, but in the end, he stood me up because of Lyra Carter. I mumbled, "Well, see when the time comes." The hand around my waist tightened instantly. I hissed in pain and instinctively struggled. Why? Ethan Hale held me tightly around the waist, his voice low. Didn't you always want to see the aurora with me? You said that kissing under the aurora with your loved one is a very romantic thing. I lowered my eyelashes and said softly, "Didn't you say we shouldn't waste time on such useless things? Besides, there are still several days until the 5th anniversary. Let's talk about it then. I'm going to sleep now. I'm so sleepy." I closed my eyes and pretended to be asleep. Actually, I've already seen the aurora borealis in Antarctica. She booked a plane ticket overnight after realizing she was a fake heiress. After all, a trip to Antarctica starts at 300,000 yuan. If you don't enjoy life, you'll really run out of money. As for feeling sad, let's wait and see. When Ethan Hale woke up the next day, he had already gone to work. I checked the time on my phone, and sure enough, he had sent me a message. "The medicine is on the table. Remember to take it. I have congenital heart disease." Before my true identity as a fake heiress was exposed, even though my family was in the upper class, no one was willing to marry me. After all, this disease means you won't live long. You might pass away any day. Marriages between wealthy families do involve financial interests. But what does it matter if the person is gone? A second marriage will be significantly less attractive, but Ethan Hale is willing to marry me. Moreover, although I was once the envy of everyone as a wealthy heiress, I wasn't the only one in my family. My philandering father only had me and my brother at home, but outside he had a whole football team of illegitimate sons and daughters. Therefore, when they learned that I had no use even for the sole purpose of marriage, they didn't even bother to treat my illness. The rich are not as generous as you might imagine. They are very generous to those who are in their favor, but useless people are selfish and cold-blooded. Ethan Hale, however, did not mind my illness at all. He withstood the pressure from his parents and countless other rumors and married me in the grandest wedding. After I married into the family, the first thing they did was find me the best doctor in the country to treat me. 2 years ago, I finally completed the transplant surgery and am currently recovering slowly. Everything should have been going in the best possible direction. But for some reason, only 5 years later, everything suddenly changed. Ethan Hale started coming home later and later. His clothes smelled of unfamiliar perfume, and I could no longer freely look at his phone. But I can tolerate all of this because my father favored boys over girls. I never learned anything about managing a company. Knowing I couldn't offer him any help at work, I could only keep telling myself that, don't worry about it, this is just a job. But then, his childhood sweetheart, whom he had grown up with, returned from abroad. I joined his company. Ethan Hale admires her. I admire her solid professional skills and her intelligent and calm mind. Such a cold and harsh person, yet he repeatedly praised her generously in public. Gradually, rumors began to circulate outside. Leila Carter, she and Ethan Hale are more like a couple. Moreover, it is said that the two were originally betrothed as children, but for some unknown reason, it was suddenly cancelled. Leila Carter went abroad to pursue her dreams, while Ethan Hale stayed in the country to develop his career. A friend warned me to be careful of Leila Carter. I comforted her, saying that they were not only friends but also colleagues, and this was just an unavoidable interaction during work. But Ethan Hale's next actions made me instantly realize my mistake. Even though she's such a strict person when it comes to work, she told me to bear with it when I got COVID-19. He'll take me to the hospital after he finishes his work. But because Leila Carter only sneezed, he abandoned a multi-million-dollar contract and took her to the hospital for treatment. Later on, such incidents became more and more frequent. When I'm at work, he considers my time to be for work and asks me not to send too many messages or make too many phone calls to bother him. After get off work, his time belongs to Leila Carter, and I asked him to give him some private space and not restrict his friendships. Whenever he left me to go see Leila Carter, I wanted to talk to him and have a proper conversation with him, but we couldn't communicate because he simply wouldn't give me the chance. Finally, one day, I firmly kept him there and told him a lot about how his transgressions with Leila Carter made me unhappy. I thought that after this, the conflict between us could be completely resolved, but he casually remarked, "We're just friends. If anything were going to happen, it would have happened long ago. You wouldn't even have a chance to know." Let me completely shut up. Yes, in every respect, Leila Carter is far superior to me. I could only remain silent and let him go to Leila Carter again, until one time, at a gathering with other wives, one of them, with the intention of watching a good show, showed me a photo. Under the streetlights, Ethan Hale held a drunk Leila Carter in his arms, still carrying her high heels that she had taken off. Ethan Hale has always hated drinking. He also dislikes drunk people because alcohol makes people lose their minds. On his last birthday, quite a few people toasted him. He couldn't refuse, so as his wife, I naturally drank many glasses for him, but I can't hold my liquor well either. All sorts of red and white things were mixed together, and I vomited until I was completely drunk, to the point that I didn't even have the strength to move a finger. I could only whine and beg him to carry me to the shower. Ethan Hale frowned, looking down at me as I held the toilet. "You smell terrible. I'll have your auntie come over in a bit." But the people in the photo showed no sign of disgust. He lowered his eyes, moving with extreme care, as if the person in his arms were some rare treasure. Hale, both the Carter and Carter families are top-tier families, and the leaked photos caused an instant uproar in the industry. The two of them became the protagonists in a novel's tale of reconciliation after a broken relationship, while I became a complete laughingstock. By the time Ethan Hale finally got home, it was noon the next day. I heard myself numbly ask, "Where did you go last night?" Ethan Hale seemed oblivious to the odd tone in my voice, and replied while taking off his coat, "Overtime." I smiled, but my heart was clenching with pain. "Did you work overtime at Leila Carter's house?" He paused, frowned at me, and asked, "What's wrong with you now?" I pulled up a photo on my phone and held it up in front of him, my eyes reddening. "Are you out of your mind? Don't you hate the smell of alcohol the most? But you seem to be hugging her quite happily. So you don't hate the smell of alcohol, you just hate me." But if you don't like me, why did you insist on marrying me in the first place? In the end, I couldn't help but slam a mug on the table. That cup was made together during our honeymoon. Ethan Hale, who has always preferred simple and plain colors, couldn't resist that brightly colored cup. He turned a deaf ear even when his employees privately complained that he was childish. The sound of shattering porcelain echoed in the silent room. But I seemed oblivious and continued, Ethan Hale, it's only been a few years since we got married. You're already impatient. If you're tired of me, just get a divorce. What kind of nonsense is this? Lying to me. He ignored me, instead looking down at his phone, his fingers flying across the keyboard as if replying to a message. After replying, he finally looked up at me, his expression indifferent. So, this is your reason for questioning me, just for such a trivial matter? A small matter? I find it incredible. Otherwise what? His tone became more forceful, and his eyes were filled with weariness. Chloe, all our arguments stem from your distrust of me. If that's the case, then what explanation do I have? I clenched my fists, and my pent-up anger finally exploded. I took off the ring and threw it. Then get out. Let's get a divorce. The ring fell to the ground and rolled under the sofa. Ethan Hale's pupils contracted, and he slammed the door and left. I sat on the sofa and cried for a long time. When I was ready to pack my bags and leave, I found a painting under the sofa cushions. The painting depicts me, with a bright smile, but around my slender neck I wear a necklace I've never seen before. Suddenly realizing something, I turned on the security camera in the living room. At 3 in the morning, Ethan Hale returned. My heart skipped a beat. Had he come back before? But I didn't even notice. In the surveillance footage, Ethan Hale saw me sleeping in the living room and quietly took a blanket and covered me with it. I thought he would take a shower because he's a clean freak and the first thing he does when he comes back from outside is to clean up. But he moved a stool and sat down next to me. Then he took out drawing paper and pencil from his briefcase and began to draw. It took 2 hours to finally finish drawing. Suddenly, I rolled over, startling Ethan Hale, who thought I was awake. He quickly hid the drawing paper under a pillow. Seeing that I wasn't awake, he breathed a sigh of relief and then went upstairs to take a shower. But after taking a shower, he didn't go back to his room to rest. Instead, he went out to work again. So Ethan Hale did come back. I just didn't know it. I stared blankly at the painting. A sour feeling gradually welled up in my heart. Since getting married, Mr. Hale has handed over all his businesses to Ethan Hale, and he is often overwhelmed with work. Sleeping only 4 or 5 hours a day has become the norm for him. But of his remaining 4 hours of rest, he gave me 2 of them. It was all for designing something I casually mentioned wanting at the time. Ethan Hale originally wanted to be a jewelry designer, but ultimately chose to give it up because he had to inherit the family business. At our wedding, I said regretfully, I was hoping you would design a necklace for me yourself. I clenched the drawing paper in my palm, hesitated for a long time, and then took out my phone and found the profile picture that I had blocked. I'm sorry I misunderstood you, Ethan. Let's talk this out, okay? I don't want to continue this Cold War with you. But Ethan Hale didn't reply to me. Thinking he was probably too busy with work to send any more messages, I picked up the ceramic shards from the ground and pieced them back together little by little. He then took the initiative to cook a table full of his favorite dishes, but Ethan Hale did not return by midnight. There was no reply to the message. Fearing a repeat of yesterday when he actually came home but I was asleep, I made myself a cup of black coffee and, despite feeling extremely sleepy, sat on the sofa waiting for him to come home. But even as the sun rose, Ethan Hale still hadn't returned home. I'm so sleepy. I have to catch up on my sleep first. When I woke up, it was already afternoon. I eagerly watched the surveillance footage, but after 3 hours, I discovered that Ethan Hale hadn't returned since noon yesterday. My heart turned completely cold. I wanted to go to his company to find him, but the receptionist stopped me. I'm sorry, Mum. I can't let you up without an appointment, I said, somewhat exasperated. Since you know who I am, why did you need to make an appointment with me? The receptionist looked embarrassed. I'm sorry, Mum. This is Mr. Hale's decision. Everyone needs to make an appointment. That includes you too. The receptionist is just an ordinary worker, and I didn't want to make things difficult for her. As I turned to leave, I overheard the employees whispering among themselves, She's Mrs. Hale? She's nothing compared to Manager Carter. Exactly. She's clearly Hale's wife, yet she needs an appointment to see him. Yes, unlike Manager Carter, who doesn't even need to knock to get into President Hale's office. I paused, the dull pain making it hard to breathe. and I felt that my behavior was quite ridiculous. They come to your door to be humiliated. It turns out it really wasn't my imagination. It's not a misunderstanding. Ethan Hale does indeed have special feelings for Lyra Carter. It was so obvious that even his subordinates notice. Wait a minute. I called out to the two people who had just been talking about me. The two froze, stopped, and slowly turned around. Mrs. Hale, is there anything I can help you with? The smile was very stiff. I didn't pay attention, my gaze sweeping over the name tags on their chests. One was named Jenna, and the other Ella. I said softly, "It's nothing. I just wanted to ask you for a favor, to pass on a message to Ethan Hale." What? Ella couldn't help but ask. I took a deep breath and tried to calm myself down so that I wouldn't cry. I told him I wanted a divorce and asked him to come home after get off work and sign the divorce papers. The hall fell into a deathly silence. The two female employees also looked surprised. After saying that, I stopped looking at their reactions and turned to leave. After having a lawyer draft the divorce agreement, I started packing my bags, but I had too much stuff, so I only took a few frequently worn clothes and other everyday items. At 4:00 in the afternoon, Ethan Hale returned. I handed him the divorce papers, signed them. He paused for only a second before picking up the pen and signing without hesitation. Okay, apart from that, there wasn't a single extra word. Compared to my painful struggle, they were as indifferent as outsiders. After signing the divorce agreement, we went to the Civil Affairs Bureau to complete the divorce process. However, a 30-day cooling-off period is required before the divorce is considered final. If one party changes their mind during this period, the divorce will fail. To prevent myself from having a sudden change of heart due to falling in love, I moved out of Hale Manor and back to Hawthorne Manor. My mom thought Ethan Hale and I were just having a simple emotional outburst, so she offered me a few words of comfort. But later I realized I was serious. She advised me to be cautious. The Hale family is now incredibly powerful in New York. Are you really willing to be their pawn? But I didn't listen and insisted on getting a divorce. I don't think Ethan Hale and I can ever go back to the way things were, because I hate him. I hate his arrogance. I hate his indifference, and I hate his deception. But before I could even feel resentment for a few days, a bombshell announcement plunged me into hell. I am not my parents' biological child. I was born during an earthquake. In the chaos, my biological parents were crushed to death, and the Hawthorne family's real daughter also died in that earthquake. I was rescued because I was mistaken for Hawthorne's daughter. My world has completely collapsed, but what made me even more desperate was that my adoptive parents were actually able to show absolutely no mercy. They suspended all my cards, kicked me out of Hawthorne Manor, forbade me to take anything with me, and announced my identity as a fake heiress. Because I had no money, I ended up on the streets that night. I was planning to find a place to stay for a while, but I ended up encountering a group of drunk thugs. They cornered me in a dimly lit alley, their lewd eyes grinning as they approached me. I struggled fiercely and finally managed to escape. My body trembled, and I instinctively dialed Ethan Hale's number, but when the call connected, a sweet female voice answered. "Ethan is asleep. May I ask who you are?" I hung up the phone. The female voice on the other end of the phone sounded familiar. It was Lyra Carter, but she didn't recognize me. What does that mean? This shows that Ethan Hale couldn't even be bothered to add a note for me. Although I had accepted the fact that he no longer loved me, my heart still couldn't help but clench at that moment. I had no choice but to call the police myself and spent the whole night sitting in the police station. After a whole night of tossing and turning, I was completely exhausted, both physically and mentally. I dared not settle any longer, so I sold my wedding ring and finally got some money. When I left Hawthorne Estate, my father took all the money I had on me, as well as everything else of value, because he said it belonged to the Hawthorne family, not to an outsider like me. But when he saw the wedding ring on my hand, he didn't take it away, because this belongs to Ethan Hale. I saw Ethan Hale again 2 weeks later. At this moment, I am huddled in a 10 square meter rented room. Because I am not a biological child of the Hawthorne family, my ID card is also invalid, unable to find a job or stay in a proper hotel, and needing time to replace his ID card. He had no choice but to stay in an unlicensed motel. Ethan Hale hasn't changed at all. Even after so long, he remained as dignified and composed as ever, as if the divorce had no impact on him whatsoever. He looked down at me. "I'm sorry. I was too busy the past few days and didn't have time. Now we can talk about the divorce in detail." I was stunned and didn't say anything. He looked me up and down, His gaze finally settling on my ring finger, he asked, "Where's the wedding ring I gave you?" I opened my eyes wide and instinctively covered my finger. Only then realizing that I had already sold the ring, Ethan Hale continued, "Since we're getting a divorce, we need to settle our assets. I bought that ring, so you should return it to me. As for the dowry you brought from the Hawthorne family, Hawthorne always said that you are not a daughter of the Hawthorne family, so I will not give you the property that was divided up. We've been married for so long, I can let bygones be bygones for everything else, but you still have to return my wedding ring, right?" With tears streaming down my face, I said, "I'm sorry I sold it." Ethan Hale bent down and gently wiped away the tears from the corner of my eyes. "It's okay, I don't blame you," but as he got up, I suddenly grabbed his arm and burst into tears. "I'm sorry. It was my fault. Let's not get a divorce, okay?" Ethan Hale smiled slightly, took a new ring from his suit pocket, and put it on my finger. "Good. I could have been ruthless enough to cut ties with someone. At worst, it'll just hurt for a bit. You can just bear it and it'll pass, but money won't do." Less than a month after leaving Ethan Hale, I was living like a monster. Because of my remarriage to Ethan Hale, my father has accepted my identity as a fake heiress again. He told the public that it was all a misunderstanding and that he was the real biological daughter of the Hawthorne family. Everything seemed to have returned to square one, but I know that all this beauty only exists as long as I haven't left Ethan Hale. I will fall into hell if I leave him. From that moment on, I dared not do it again. He stopped caring about Ethan Hale and stopped interfering in his affairs. Ethan Hale was very satisfied with the changes I made. At night, he kissed my earlobe, his voice tender and affectionate. "Chloe, you're being so good right now." I softly agreed. "I'm slowly adjusting now." Under my father's tutoring, I completely transformed into the kind of person Ethan Hale would have liked the most, obedient and well-behaved. But the fear that those 14 days brought me was absolutely terrifying. During this time, I learned translation, thinking that if he were to marry Leela Carter and divorce me, I could support myself. But that wasn't enough, so I sold all the gifts Ethan Hale had given me to prevent him from taking my things back after the divorce. I would ask about every transfer he made to me. "You gave it voluntarily, right?" Only after receiving an affirmative answer did I feel relieved enough to accept it. Having money makes me feel much more relaxed. My mind went from wondering every day whether Ethan Hale loved me to figuring out how to get more money from him. Fortunately, Ethan Hale, though he didn't love me, was very generous. In less than a month, I had saved up $5 million in my savings, and I finally received an offer from an Australian company. As soon as my visa is approved, I can set off immediately. But I don't plan to tell Ethan Hale about this. One reason is that he wouldn't be interested even if I told him. Secondly, I have indeed lost the desire to share with him. Ethan Hale, however, was very unhappy with my behavior. When I came back from class, I saw the man sitting on the sofa. His dark eyes turned cold. "Where did you go today?" I was baffled. He had never asked about these things before, but I still answered honestly, "I went to class." "Then what?" I was even more confused. "And then that was it." "What happened?" "It's nothing, just asking." That night, as I was drifting off to sleep with my back to Ethan Hale, he suddenly spoke. "I heard someone sent you another photo of me having dinner with Leela Carter today." I was so sleepy, I mumbled, There's nothing between her and me. We were just having dinner to talk about our recent projects." Ethan Hale suddenly stopped, because he heard my soft breathing. While I was sound asleep, my pants were suddenly pulled down. I woke up instantly, tugging at my pants. "What are you doing? What do you think?" Ethan Hale's voice was calm, but his actions left no room for refusal. I was in excruciating pain, but I tried my best to relax my body and accommodate him. "Did you hear what I just said?" What did you say?" Ethan Hale paused, then became even more aggressive. I curled up, feeling like I was about to collapse. "If you knew, why didn't you ask me?" I was breathing heavily and said haltingly, I believe you, and there's nothing to ask." Ethan Hale leaned down and bit my lips hard. "Lie," he said coldly. I hissed in pain and instinctively struggled, but it had absolutely no effect. He suddenly stopped and stared intently into my eyes. I looked at him wearily, feeling only sleepy. I wanted him to finish quickly so I could go to sleep. He closed his eyes and began kissing me rapidly and frantically again. The next day I received good news. My visa had been approved. In 3 more days, I can leave for Australia. Just as she was packing her things for going abroad, she received a call from Ethan Hale. He said today is our 5th anniversary and asked me to wait for him at the company. Looking at the calendar on the wall, I suddenly remembered. When I arrived at the company, I didn't ask the receptionist to take me upstairs instead. I sat on the sofa and waited quietly. While using my phone, I ran into those 2 employees who had complained about me last time. They glanced at me furtively. I ignored it and continued playing on my phone with my head down. But then she suddenly said, "Hey, Jenna, did you hear? Hale suddenly threw a huge tantrum today." "Jenna," he asked in shock. "What happened?" He glanced at me again, then continued. "It's all because Carter's assistant walked into Hale's office without knocking, and Hale immediately kicked him out." Mr. Hale also said that only his wife is allowed to enter his office without knocking, so that manager Carter would notice and that if she did it again, she wouldn't have to stay here. After they finished speaking, they both glanced at me furtively. I didn't even look up, continuing to play Candy Crush with my head down. A short while later, Ethan Hale came down, but he looked very unwell. He stared intently at the game interface I hadn't yet closed, his gaze heavy. "You're here, why aren't you up?" I replied matter-of-factly, "Because I didn't make an appointment." "You're my wife. What do you need an appointment for?" Ethan Hale said angrily. "Yes, I will." I looked up at him and said calmly, "Last time I came to see you, the receptionist said I couldn't go up without an appointment." Ethan Hale abruptly turned to look at the front desk. I stood up to block his view. "It has nothing to do with her. She's an employee and can only listen to the boss, Chloe." Ethan Hale looked at me, seemingly wanting to say something but then stopping himself, but in the end, he said nothing. I couldn't be bothered to listen to his explanation. I was leaving in a few days anyway. Ethan Hale, however, took my hand and led me to his office. "This is my first time visiting this place." He took a beautifully crafted gift box from the drawer and handed it to me. "Chloe, this is a 5th anniversary gift for you." I took it and opened it. It was the necklace he had designed for me last time. The necklace was studded with sparkling pink diamonds, and it looked very valuable. I started to silently estimate how much it could sell for. "Chloe, where's the gift you gave me?" A cold voice rang out, and I looked up, only to meet Ethan Hale's chilling gaze. That's when I remembered that I forgot to prepare a gift for him. I was a little embarrassed. I'm sorry, I forgot. I'll give it to you in a few days." "Forgot?" Ethan Hale exclaimed in disbelief. "You could forget something so important?" "I wouldn't have done that before, but now I don't care anymore, so I've naturally forgotten about it." Just as I was about to say something to make amends, the door was suddenly pushed open. "Ethan, it's been so long. Why haven't you come to comfort me yet? If you don't come soon, I'm going to give birth. It's Lyra Carter." I felt a little embarrassed. Just as she was about to say hello, Ethan Hale picked up the documents on the table and threw them at Lyra Carter. "Get out of here. Didn't I tell you to knock before entering the office?" Lyra Carter stood there stunned, her eyes instantly reddening. I was even more embarrassed. She glared at me hatefully, then ran away crying. Because of this incident, the anniversary celebration ended on a sour note. As I was going to bed that night, Ella suddenly sent me a message. "Miss Chloe, please stop being angry with Mr. Hale. What Jenna and I said today was something Mr. Hale deliberately had us say to you. He still cares about you." I replied to her, "Did he ask you to send this too?" After a moment of silence, the reply came, "No, me. I know you did this on purpose." Actually, I could tell their clumsy performance at a glance. In the past, I would have felt happy. This is seen as a way for Ethan Hale to express his feelings. But now, I don't care anymore. I've been incredibly busy these past few days because I'm about to go abroad, but just when I was busiest, Ethan Hale kept sending me messages. They send me a message almost every hour. He wasn't reporting what he was doing. He was just sharing some everyday things with me. But because I'm too busy, I only reply with a cute emoji each time, perfunctorily ending the conversation. In the office, Ethan Hale stared at the cute cat head in the chat window, gripping his phone tightly. Scrolling up, you can see his chat history with Chloe, where he sends long messages and she replies with simple emojis. He suddenly remembered what Chloe had once told him. She would send emojis when she didn't want to continue chatting. Ethan Hale asked why. Chloe chuckled and said, "Because this way, I won't seem cold to the other person, and it also prevents the conversation from continuing." For 3 whole days, Chloe used this method to brush off his conversations wrong, for no apparent reason. Ethan Hale suddenly felt a little uneasy. Chloe used to be someone who loved sharing with him. Even if his responses never exceed 10 words, she can always find ways to continue their conversation. Until his patience ran out, he said coldly that he had had enough. Only then will Chloe completely quiet down. But why is Chloe being so dismissive of him now? The day finally arrived for me to leave the country. I planned to go back to Hawthorne Estate first to say a final goodbye to my adoptive parents. Although they were ruthless, they did raise me. From then on, I no longer owed them anything. But outside the study, I overheard my parents' conversation. Isn't it wrong for us to help Ethan Hale deceive Chloe like this? She is, after all, our own daughter. With a bang, the string in my brain snapped instantly. My dad snorted coldly. So what if she's my biological daughter? Who told her to be so ungrateful? She married such a good husband and she's still not satisfied. All she does is cause trouble all day. If Ethan hadn't made us lie to Chloe that she wasn't our biological daughter, kick her out, and then bring in thugs to pressure her, do you think she would have obediently agreed to remarry? I looked down at the ring on my ring finger and remembered Ethan Hale's smug expression that day, and felt my blood run cold. What I thought was forgiveness and redemption was nothing more than a carefully orchestrated scheme by him. Fortunately, the place in my heart that belonged to him can no longer be stirred by any waves. I thought I was going to break down, but I remained calm throughout. I left Hawthorne Manor quietly and returned to Hale Manor, where I took off the ring Ethan Hale had given me and placed it on the table. Just then, the Civil Affairs Bureau called me. They said the 30-day cooling-off period for divorce was over, and Ethan Hale and I were officially divorced. After hanging up the phone, I felt completely relieved. In the end, I left a note. The cooling-off period for divorce is over. Goodbye forever. Then I deleted all his contact information. Besides never wanting to see him again, I'm also afraid that Ethan Hale will ask me for everything he gave me back. After all, given his abilities, if he wanted to, I wouldn't even get a single bowl. But if I delete him and run abroad, even if he has a lot of power, it will be almost impossible for him to get the money back. That's why I chose to go abroad. I boarded the plane, watched the buildings below gradually shrink, put on my eye mask, and started to sleep. Ethan Hale, gone forever. Ethan Hale was completely stunned when he received the call from the Civil Affairs Department. He couldn't understand what the Civil Affairs Bureau staff meant by saying. Neither of them regretted their decision during the cooling-off period for the divorce, so the divorce was successful. He, who was always calm and composed, was completely enraged. What nonsense are you talking about? My wife loves me so much. How could she possibly divorce me? The staff member sounded puzzled. But we just contacted Miss Chloe, and she has indeed agreed to the divorce. Ethan Hale's pupils contracted, ignoring the upcoming collaboration. He drove home, running numerous red lights along the way, but when they got home, they searched every corner of the villa, but couldn't find Chloe anywhere. Finally, they found a note she had left on the table. The 30-day cooling-off period for divorce has expired. Goodbye forever. At that moment, Ethan Hale seemed to have all his strength drained away, and he knelt down on the ground. After the intense pain came an unstoppable resentment. How could she be so heartless as to just leave me like that? No, we have to find her. Ethan Hale sent people to investigate and found out that Chloe had actually gone abroad to Australia. Ethan Hale bought a plane ticket to Australia almost without thinking, but it was stopped by a phone call. On the phone, Mr. Hale's voice was icy cold and threatening. Are you really going to give up everything you have for a woman? Let me remind you, the reason you were able to be with Chloe in the first place was because you agreed to become the heir to the Hale family. If you give up this identity now, do you think you can find her on your own? Even if you find her, can you keep her? Ethan Hale could only endure the immense pain and remain in the country. He thought, it's okay. Chloe loves him so much, she will definitely wait for him. Once he finishes this project, he will immediately go to Australia to find Chloe and bring her back. If the two remarry, he will design a set of jewelry for her by hand, making her the most dazzling bride in all of New York. With that in mind, he worked tirelessly day and night, and the project that originally took more than a year to complete was finished in just 6 months by Ethan Hale. He finally gained the right to go find Chloe. When Chloe saw her again, she saw a man carefully supporting her. Chloe smiled and said to him, "Don't be so nervous. It's only been a month. Nothing will happen." Through translation, I've made many friends from all over the country. I also met some fellow countrymen. That day after get off work, I was about to go home when I saw a boy. He squatted down against an old wall, on which were written, "They don't want to talk to me." I was somewhat moved. When I was in that rented room, I also felt like I had been abandoned by the whole world. I walked over to him and whispered, "Are you all right?" Upon hearing the voice, his eyes lit up. "You're Chinese?" I nodded. At that moment, he burst into tears. He said his name was Arthur Vance, and that his parents had sent him to study in this unfamiliar country, but he was isolated by the group because he was not good at foreign languages. I finally met a fellow countryman in a foreign land, and we exchanged contact information. In my spare time, I would teach him spoken English. To thank me, Arthur Vance would pay me a considerable sum each time. I was flattered. "That's too much," he smiled and said. "I just want someone to talk to. You can take it. Money is the last thing I need anyway." I accepted it anyway. After all, what happened before left me with a very serious psychological trauma. Arthur Vance can't cook and can only eat unpalatable white food every day. I felt sorry for him, so I would call him to join me every time I cooked. He wolfed down his food while praising, "From now on, it'll cover all your cooking and grocery shopping expenses. It's so delicious." 3 months later, Arthur Vance confessed his feelings to me. I'm not surprised at all after all. The way he looked at me was so hot it felt like it was melting me. I thought for a moment, I can give it a try first. Anyway, I'm rich now, so I'm not afraid of breaking up. Moreover, Arthur Vance is young and beautiful, so even if they break up, he won't lose out. But unexpectedly, as we talked, we got married. Arthur Vance didn't mind that I had been married before. He said, "Thank you for your ungrateful kindness, my ex-husband. I will pray to God that he will go to heaven after he dies." I was both amused and exasperated. If it weren't for Arthur Vance proposing to me, I would have almost forgotten about Ethan Hale. But right now, this person I'd almost forgotten is walking towards me with a gloomy face. "Chloe Hawthorne, it really is you." Arthur Vance immediately shielded me behind him, his expression wary. "Who are you? What do you want with my wife?" Wife? At that moment, Ethan Hale's handsome face became extremely distorted. He gritted his teeth, his eyes reddening, and said in disbelief, "Chloe Hawthorne, we've only been apart for a short time, and you're already married?" I said calmly, "If you don't get married, are you expecting to be a widow for me?" "Exactly." Arthur Vance scoffed. "So you're that ex-husband guy, huh? You were such a jerk to get Chloe away. And now you're here pretending to be all lovey-dovey." Ethan Hale said with a grim face, "You have no right to speak here. That's enough." I looked wearily at Ethan Hale. "Now that you're here, let's have a proper talk." Ethan Hale and I found a nearby coffee shop, and I asked Arthur Vance to wait for me outside in the coffee shop. Soothing music was playing, but Ethan Hale looked terrible. His voice was hoarse. "Lyra Carter and I really have nothing." When the Hale family was in crisis and almost went bankrupt, it was the Carter family that helped them out. Later, the Hale family made a comeback, but the Carter family gradually declined. I just looked after Carter and mentored her so that she could better manage the Carter family in the future. I can pretend your marriage to him never happened. As long as you divorce him now and abort the child, we can go back to how things were before. I found it laughable after hearing it. "Ethan Hale, we can't go back to the way things were, because I don't care anymore." Ethan Hale's expression was shattered. He couldn't believe it. "Why? You clearly love me so much. You painstakingly glued the broken cup back together, and even stayed up all night waiting for me to come home." After hearing what he said, I felt even more like I was an idiot before. I looked out the window at Arthur Vance, who was waiting for me expectantly, and smiled slightly. "Of course, it's because I don't love you anymore." Ethan Hale followed my gaze and looked outside. When he saw Arthur Vance's provocative look, his pupils contracted. He clenched his fists. "What's so great about him? What makes you want to let go of our 7-year relationship? He's just a greenhorn. What can he offer you?" I thought for a moment and said, "He gave me so many things. I can't even count them all. But most importantly, he always praised me. Just because of that." Ethan Hale found it unbelievable. "That's why." My voice was soft, but firm. Ethan Hale suddenly grabbed my hand. "I can do that too." Arthur Vance, standing outside the glass, widened his eyes in shock at the sight and pounded on the glass. Hey, what are you doing? Talk to me. Don't get physical." I pulled Ethan Hale's hand away and gently shook my head. "You can't do it," Ethan Hale said urgently. "How would you know if you haven't tried? Because you are someone who will stop at nothing to achieve your goals." I looked at him and said, "How could someone like you possibly know how to respect their partner?" Looking into my eyes, Ethan Hale suddenly trembled. "What do you mean?" I smiled and said, "I know everything about you and my parents." Ethan Hale's face drained of all color instantly, turning a frighteningly pale white. To keep me from leaving you, you cut off all my escape routes, trying to turn me into a caged canary. I asked why my dad took all my valuables but left my wedding ring. So that's what you wanted to remind me. I can't live without you. I raised my right hand, showing off the diamond ring on my ring finger. But in this world, everyone is an independent individual. I love you, but that doesn't mean I have to become dependent on you. But you didn't treat me as your lover, but as a plaything that could only depend on you to survive. You would coax me a little when you were happy, and ignore me when you were unhappy, while I repeatedly fell into self-doubt and pain because of you. You were smug and self-satisfied. I feel that I have mastered my emotions, which is something to be very proud of. So, Ethan Hale, do you think we can go back to the past? Ethan Hale's lips trembled, and he finally managed to utter only 3 words, sorry. After that day, Ethan Hale left, Arthur Vance and I returned to a stable life. I heard from him again at the baby's 1-month celebration. This custom doesn't exist in other countries, but we still held one for the children. But on that day, I received a gift box from the United States. Upon opening it, one finds a delicate and exquisite safety lock inside. There was also a letter inside, which read, I had imagined countless times what our children would be like, but sadly, I will never see it. Let this peace lock represent my longing, Chloe. I wish you happiness for the rest of your life. While I was lost in thought, a child's loud crying interrupted my thoughts. Looking back, I saw Arthur Vance holding the child and gently comforting him. I smiled and tossed the silver lock into the burning fireplace. The letter and its contents vanished along with it. From then on, love and hate waxed and waned.